firing on people. But dictatorships are established by people signing papers behind closed doors. And by the time we understand the implications, it's too late to resist. And to understand the current situation in Israel, there is really just one simple question that people need to ask. What limits the power of the government? In other countries, like in the US, you have many limitations, checks and balances. You have the House of Representatives, the Senate, the President, the Constitution, the Supreme Court, the federal system is being established. In Israel, there is just one government, and that's the Supreme Court. That's it. We don't have a constitution. We don't have a Senate. We don't have a federal system. And now the government is trying to gain control of the Supreme Court. Once it does it, there is no limitation on its power, none. And they already prepared or talking about dozens of laws that will discriminate against Muslims, against Christians, against secular people, against women, against LGBT people. They're just the only thing that prevents this anti-democratic flood at the present is the Supreme Court. They're just waiting to gain control of it and then flood it. Nobody wants to get a meeting to stop it. This is not really just about Israel. You know, for people who care about Israeli democracy or about the Jewish people, they are deeply, whatever your views about Israel and the Jewish people. Because if Israel becomes an undemocratic dictatorship, if it becomes this extreme regime, it will not be anything like Hungary. Hungary is a member of the European Union, and limitations because of that. Hungary does not hold millions of people under occupation. Hungary is not involved in an active military confrontation with nearby countries. Hungary doesn't have nuclear weapons. It doesn't have advanced cyber weapons. Israel is completely different. It holds millions of people under occupation. It is involved in this large-scale conflict. It has nuclear weapons. It has one of the strongest armies in the Middle East. It has cyber weapons that can strike anywhere in the world. If this kind of power falls into the hands of an autocratic regime, which is also a fundamentalist religious regime with expansionist aims and with this belief in Jewish supremacy, it will set the whole Middle East on fire. Believe me, I don't if Netanyahu had retired after 2 terms in office, or after, say, 8 years, I think, even though I didn't like many of the things he did, I think he would have retired as one of the great leaders of Israel. Now, his legacy is and certainly the divider of Israel, the person who divided the Israeli nation against itself, and I hope we don't get there, but it could go down in history as the person who destroyed the state of Israel. The whole humanity, and not Israel, but when my house is on fire, it's playing to remove. And
active, you were out there demonstrating before the horrors of October 7th because of what the Prime Minister was trying to do as a conservative with Israeli institutions.
Same thing. He was trying to systematically destroy the institutions of Israeli democracy, and we had the same conspiracy theories about the deep state, also in Israel. And actually, this is one of the key explanations for what happened on October 7th. That you had for months the army, the Secret Service, the Shin Bet, all Hezbollah of Iran were in an extremely dangerous situation. And he just didn't listen. And the reason he didn't listen, and the people around him didn't listen, they had a theory in their minds of the public perspective that all these military experts, the chief of the IDF, the chief of the Shin Bet, they are part of the deep state conspiracy against them. They don't really have information. They don't really believe that Israel is in danger. Israel is in no danger at all. They are just making these warnings in order to force me to stop the judicial overhaul. The attempt to, again, destroy the institutions of Israel. this is how we got to October the 7th. But on a deeper level, I would say that what is happening in Israel has been happening for not just in the recent years, but for years now. Is a struggle for the soul of the country, and more than that, for the soul of Judaism. Between Zionism, the national movement of the Jewish people, and a new messianic mutation of Judaism that believed in Jewish supremacy. You know, we talked about the difference between good nationalism and bad nationalism. At its best, nationalism recognizes the uniqueness of our nation and talks about our right to develop our traditions and so forth. At its worst, it falls victim to this supremacy complex. But we are not just unique, we are superior to everybody. And we now have this movement of Jewish supremacy in Israel. It's part of the coalition, it's part of the government. They have a messianic vision for the country. If you ask them, what do you see in the future, 5 years, 10 years down the road? They also talk in terms of from the river to the sea, of a single big Israel with Jews supreme, basically a three-caste system, with Jews supreme with full rights, some Arabs with some rights as second-class citizens, and lots of other Arabs with no rights at all. This is their vision for the country.
You're talking about some of the far right that's in the coalition. That's right.
In the coalition with Netanyahu. If this is the big fight, we are trying to stop them. If we fail, if they succeed in realizing this messianic vision, this will change the very meaning of Judaism all over the world. So people here will also have to deal with the consequences.
Since October 7th, you've defended Israel's right to exist. You've been critical of the progressive left that blames Israel and the occupation. How do you reconcile these complicated views?
Two ideas held at the same time. No problem. I mean, I'm in favor of Palestinians realizing their rights to live a dignified life in their homeland, and at the same time, I'm in favor of Israelis having their rights to live dignified lives in their homeland. What exactly the solution would look like? Two states, this kind of solution, it's difficult to say at the present moment. But at the end of the road, we need a situation when the right to exist, not just to exist, but again to live dignified lives of both nations is recognized. And there shouldn't be a logical contradiction. Just because you're in favor of the rights of Palestinians doesn't mean you have to be also in favor of destroying Israel completely. And just because you're in favor of defending Israel doesn't mean that you should ignore the terrible suffering of the Palestinians and Gaza. If you give good people bad information, they make bad decisions. And what we see through history in terms of the underlying flow and structure of information, if we go back, let's say, 5,000 years ago, to one of the first crucial information revolutions, to understand how information technology shapes history. So think about the invention of writing. The invention of writing in technological terms, it's extremely simple. In ancient Mesopotamia, people discovered that you can take mud, and you take a stick, and you imprint certain signs in the mud, and you get a written document. And you can write all kinds of things there. So the technology is extremely simple. Of course, the key is finding the right code. But the technology itself, you just need mud and a stick. That's what you need for the first writing system. But it had enormous impact on the shape of human societies. Again, how does it work? Let's think about something like ownership. What does it mean to own something? Like you own a field. What does it mean that I own a field? This field is mine. Before writing, if you live in a small Mesopotamian village 7,000 years ago, it means that your neighbors agree that this is your field. Ownership is a communal affair. You have a field, that means that your neighbors don't bring their goats there and don't pick fruits there without your permission. So ownership is a community affair. This limits your autonomy and power as an individual. You can't sell your field to somebody else without the agreement of the community, because ownership is a matter of communal agreement. And similarly, it's very difficult for a distant authority, like a king living in the capital city hundreds of kilometers away, to know who owns what and to levy taxes. Because how can the king know who owns each field in hundreds of remote villages? It's impossible. Then writing came along and changed the meaning of ownership. Now, owning a field means that there is a piece of dry mud with certain signs on it which says that this field is mine, a document. And this lowers the power, decreases the power of the local community, and empowers, on the one side, individuals, and on the other side, the king. So the fact that ownership is now this dry piece of mud, I can take this dry piece of mud and give it to you in exchange for a herd of goats, and I don't care, and you don't care what the neighbors say, because ownership now is this document. And this means that now I have greater power over my property. But it also means that now the king in the distant capital, he can know who owns what in the entire kingdom, because he collects all these dry pieces of mud in something called an archive. And he builds a centralized bureaucracy. And the bureaucrat sitting in the capital city can know who owns which fields in distant villages just by looking at these dry pieces of mud. And he can start levying taxes. So what we see with the invention of writing, and it's a complex mechanism, it's not one-sided. On the one side, the community becomes less important, individual rights, property rights, they become more important, but also centralized authority. And this is the moment in history which we see the rise of central authoritarian systems. Kingdoms and then empires ruled by kings and tyrants and emperors. It was not possible without these dry pieces of mud.
So the newest revolutionary technology is AI, which I think in the long run will probably be more transformative than even
mud. Yes.
Mud and writing and maybe everything else when it's all said and done. But what makes AI for you a fundamentally different kind of information network? And what is it about that uniqueness that concerns you?
So let's start maybe with a story. So we're going ancient Mesopotamia, what is today Iraq, 5,000 years ago. Now let's move to a neighboring country, Iran, today. Like a scene today on the street in Isfahan or Tehran. In Iran, they have what is known as the hijab laws. That women, when they go in public, they must cover their hair. And this goes back to the Khomeini's revolution in 1979. But for many years, the Iranian regime had difficulty in imposing the hijab laws on a relatively unwilling population, because to make sure that each woman, when she goes out in the street or drives her car, is wearing a hijab, you need to place a policeman on every street, and you don't have so many policemen. And that also causes a lot of friction, because the policeman needs to arrest. And it's not, like a Hollywoodian scenario that you have one big supercomputer that now tries to take over the world. No, we need to think about it as millions and millions of AI agents, AI bureaucrats, AI soldiers, AI policemen, AI bank managers and school managers and so forth, that constantly watch us and make decisions about us.
Well, to go back to the point you were making earlier about how rudimentary a technology like writing was, or even the printing press, or television, or radio, by comparison, AI is infinitely more complicated and for that reason, unpredictable. I mean, can we even imagine? Can we even anticipate where this might go? When you consider how transformative writing was, do we have any inkling of how transformative and how uprooting this might be?
No, because the very nature of AI is that it is unpredictable. If humans can predict everything it's going to do, it is not an AI. No, there is a lot of hype nowadays about AI. So people kind of, especially when they want to sell you something, they paste the label AI on everything. Like this is AI water, and this is AI air, and this is an AI table, and so forth. So what is AI? An AI is something, a machine that can learn and change by itself. It is initially created by humans, but what humans give it is the ability to learn and change by itself.
So uncontrollable by definition.
Exactly, it's uncontrollable by definition. If you can predict and control everything it will do down the line, it's not an AI, it's just an automatic machine, which we've had for, decades and generations.
Why do we keep doing this? Why do human beings keep building things that we do not understand? Where does this drive to summon forces that we can't control come from? I mean, maybe this is the stuff of religion, but you're here, so I'm asking.
Yeah. Now, first of all, it should be said that there is enormous positive potential in AI. My job as a historian and philosopher is to talk mainly about the dangers, because you hear so much about the positive potential from the entrepreneurs and the business people who develop it. But yes, it should be very clear that there is enormous positive potential. AI can create the best healthcare system in history, the best education system in history. This ability to understand human beings and to come up with ideas that we didn't think about, it is potentially good. Like it can